November 30th was the deadline for the migration from ETR to the TIMS, that is the Tax Invoice Management System. We want to take stock. We're delighted to have the Chief Manager in charge of TIMS, Karibu Sana.
Asante.
Tell us about the compliance rate as of the close of the deadline.
I would say that we are satisfied to a large extent because our objective really is securing our revenue. And when you're talking about securing our revenue, we are looking at mostly the taxpayers who are actually making the biggest revenue contribution. And we are looking at the large taxpayers, we are looking at the medium taxpayers, and of course we can't leave out the small taxpayers. Now when you categorize them into the three categories, the large taxpayers actually have onboarded 94%, at 94% compliance. We only have very few who have not fully onboarded, but are in the process of getting on board. For the medium taxpayers, we are at 82%, still a work in progress, but it's a good figure considering their revenue impact for us. And then the smaller taxpayers is where we need a lot of work to be done because currently we are at, as at yesterday, we are at 43%.
What explains the really abysmal performance with the small taxpayers?
The smaller taxpayers make up the biggest population of our VAT registered taxpayers. So despite the fact that their contribution is not so high, but it's the largest population of our taxpayers. So the reason why it's looking like it's not a big number despite the numbers that we've actually registered, it's because many more need to still complete the process of coming on board. And we know, despite the deadline ending yesterday, we know that there's still some work that is going on in this earlier part of December to make sure that they complete the process of onboarding so that we can be able to up that percentage. We are hoping that it actually at least gets to 60%. The other thing is that out of our VAT register, we know that some of our taxpayers are actually not active. Half the number of taxpayers who are registered for VAT are actually non-filers or nil-filers. So it's something that we want to observe in the course of December so that by January, we really see what does our taxpayer register look like by the number of taxpayers who actually come on board. And maybe it will result in some bit of cleaning up to ensure that now we really know, we have a concrete figure of the taxpayers who really should be registered for VAT.
A number of business players have told me that whereas we have tried to be compliant, we have the gadgets, compatibility and integration with the KRA systems is a headache.
Yes, that is understandable and it's expected because when you look at, for example, the taxpayers who are acquiring the cash registers, that's plug and play. It on itself is a billing system on its own when you're talking about the cash register. But we have the people who have the point of sale systems. We have the people who have the ERPs. They already have their own company billing systems that they have been using within their premises. Then you are bringing in an application that needs to be integrated with KRA, for example. There's some work that needs to be done to make it compatible, to make it pick the information from the trader system into KRA. So yes, it's going to be a challenge because we have to identify the touch points and make sure that the integration is done seamlessly for us to be able to get the information on our end. So what we've been advising the taxpayer is start early, especially for the large taxpayers complied because they're the ones who have the most complex systems. They have a lot of integration points to do and they knew the amount of effort they needed to put in and they did. And that's why we actually had some success with them at 94%.
I received the question that if I've been filing nil VAT returns, should I also be deemed to be required to be compliant with this transition?
Yes, what we are focusing on active taxpayers. So you might be an unfiler because you're in the process of maybe winding down your business or you actually have applied for deregistration. By all means, you need to report to your tax service office so that we have, at least for the record, we know that you are not going to be able to come in because you are not in business. But then we have another category of taxpayers who will, for a fact, tell us they are nil filers, they are non-filers, but they have onboarded teams and are transmitting invoices. So it's just about, sometimes it's about compliance and having visibility of our taxpayers. Once they knew that we could see them is when now they started transmitting invoices. Yeah.
So what happens? Today is December 1st. Is KRA going to do a spot check or how will you be conducting yourselves today? So
from today's December 1st, we are actually now shifting our approach from the push. Our push is not now going to be focusing on onboarding taxpayers, get your ETR devices. Our push now is on compliance. we need you to transmit your invoices. So our focus is on the taxpayers who are onboarded. Are you able to transmit your invoices properly? So the course of December, that's what we'll be doing, that we'll be using the data that is available to us to make sure, one, the ones who are still onboarding, because we know there are people who have not completed the process and they have reported to us, we facilitate them to complete that process and enable them to be able to transmit invoices in case they're having challenges. So our drive now is more towards compliance, and we'll be focusing on compliance now going forward.
For those who have not complied, if you read the VAT Act, it is very clear on the penalties. Do they take effect immediately today, or KRA is extending some grace period? Especially considering it's largely the small players who are not compliant.
Okay. Now, on that one still, I'm going to say that for this month of December, we are going to adopt a facilitative approach. We are not extending the deadline. That means if you have not onboarded today, please onboard today, onboard by tomorrow, because we have said from today, and we have sent communication to the taxpayers, effective today, we need to see your team's compliant invoices. So if you know that it's going to take some time before we can see them, you know you have, the work is on your end, the ball is in your court basically, to ensure that you spend the least time possible to have your invoices in. But we are taking a facilitative approach first, but we need to see your invoices. Come January, then we'll come back to the table and now make decisions based on the data that we have received from the taxpayers.
My final question. By what proportion do you think you'll bump up the collections on VAT revenue, courtesy of this transition?
We are estimating to bump up the VAT collection by at least 30% of within the first year of implementation. So I would be saying that that's a modest estimation because most countries who have implemented such similar implementations would be looking at between 35 and 45%, depending on how compliant their taxpayers are. So at least 30%, we expect to get more than that.